ready to get inspired. This is the Go for the Goldy podcast.
Hello and welcome to episode 44 of the Go for the Goldy podcast. It's Wednesday, September 1st, 2021, and today I'm joined by fellow on-run crew member and ultra runner from Calgary, Alberta, Evan Birch. Evan, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Brian. Thanks for having me. I'm looking forward to the chat.
Yeah, definitely. And I think I always like to get these started with a quick intro about yourself. So why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself?
Yeah, sure. So I am an ultra runner, as Brian said, and I live up in Calgary, about an hour from Banff. So from some of the nicest trails you'll ever get out on, and some elevation to get the legs moving. Been running for pretty much my entire life, trail running for over 15 years, and just got into the ultra distances probably about 4 years ago. So haven't had that many races, just with some of the cancellations that have happened over the last 2 years. But I've been moving up in distance over the last 4 years.
Nice. Now, I guess right off the bat, we should describe a little bit about like ultra running, because there's really no definition. You know, like a 5K or a 10K is a standard distance. Ultra running just kind of encompasses a bunch of different distances, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so kind of the standard distances that you would see in ultra running is anything over that 42 kilometer distance mark. So obviously, with me being from Canada, we use the kilometers. So we'll go with your typical 50Ks, 100Ks, 125 kilometers, those ranges, and then you'll move up in kind of the U.S. distances. So your 50 milers, your 100 milers, and then obviously the new crazy 200 miles, and the new or the one out in Cocodona is a 330 miler. So they're definitely moving up in distance. That's for sure.
That's crazy. Yeah, this the world of endurance, or I'm sorry, of ultra running is kind of like it's been evolving, right? I mean, it seems like it's something where people are really enjoying, like pushing the envelope and seeing what's capable in human abilities.
Yeah, 100%. I think it's one of those things. When I got into it, it was more, I had done a few off-road triathlons in 2015. I did about 4 off-road triathlons, and I realized that I was never going to be able to keep up with those fast swimmers. And I can mountain bike and do other things, but I kind of got stuck on those longer distances and those off-road triathlons. And yeah, I think it's definitely, there's a huge mental component, and just challenging your body and seeing what you're capable of.
So when you say, I was actually looking at those today. When you say the off-road triathlons, you talking like kind of like that Xterra type series stuff, or?
Yeah, so I did a few of those in 2015. The Xterra events, one up in Canmore out here, and then one out in Victoria on Vancouver Island. I did one out there as well too, and then one down in Montana.
What are the distances for something like that? Do they offer like different distances for those types of races?
Yeah. So you can do the half distance. So the half distance would be like a 1,500 meter swim. The full distance would be your like 3,000 meter swim. The mountain bike is anywhere from, I believe, somewhere in the kind of 15 to 40K range in those. I never actually did a full distance. I only did the half ones. Just my swimming was never up to par, so my legs tend to drag. So swimming is not my forte.
Yeah, swimming is not my forte either. I just did the national championship for triathlon in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, about a month ago now, and it's a long story, but I didn't actually plan on going to it, and at the last minute I decided to go, and I hadn't been swimming, so I found myself flopped on a kayak halfway through the swim, so it was pretty damn embarrassing. So I'm with you on that one, man, for sure. So when you say you did trail running, how long have you been doing trail running that like kind of led you on this path to the ultra distance kind of stuff?
Yeah, so I've been trail running for probably close to 15 years now. I started out in there's a local company out here that in Alberta that runs, it's called 5 Peaks, and they run shorter distances, kind of 5K sport race, 5 to 7 kilometer sport races, and then up to enduro, which is about anywhere from about 12 to 14K, and then your half distance 21K half marathon trail runs. So that's just kind of get people into it. It's really kind of open and social, and I started just kind of at those 5 to 7 kilometer runs, and was doing really well with those, and getting a few podium finishes with those when I was a little bit younger. And I just I don't know, when I did those off-road triathlons, there's just something about you're out there by yourself for so long, and especially once you move up into these ultra distances, you realize how alone you are in certain instances, especially when you're running through the night. So it's definitely a bump jump up as soon as you move from those shorter distances. And I can't really say what triggered me to move into those longer distances. I wish I could pinpoint it, but I haven't really been able to figure it out.
No, that's really cool, and I always like there's such an added element doing the trail races as opposed to a traditional on a road, right? Because if you're doing a road, it's just like you're pacing. I mean, pacing's everything. You're looking at your watch. You're like, all right, I got to keep it. But if you're really like paying attention to almost every step that you take. There's never really autopilot, is there, in a trail run like that?
Yeah, it's you kind of get in certain sections. You tend to find a rhythm after a while, and you kind of step into it. And you might be on those hill climbs. You might be looking at your watch, and for me, I might go, oh, I want to try to keep it around this pace. I might look at it every now and then, but once you've been doing it for long enough, you have a good sense of what's runnable and what's not, and where you can pick up the speed and where you might need to slow down a little bit to save a little bit of energy further down. So it's there's a lot of strategy with it, with that back and forth, and trying to do you start at the front or do you start in the middle? Do you prefer to pass people or do you prefer to be passed? There's a lot of mental game in it when you start looking at that.
Yeah, it seems like there's just it's running's not just running. Aside from the different distances that you can do, then you add the element of terrain, and that's just a whole. I've only done like one or two trail runs, and they were like 5Ks or something like that. But I can't imagine, like you said, like running in the night in the middle of the woods by yourself. Like that would be freaking terrifying to me.
Yeah, you definitely need a good headlamp, that's for sure.
I bet. So this is a question that every ultra runner always gets, and I'm going to ask you, what is the longest race that you've ever done? And the second part of the question would be, is that the longest run you've ever done?
Yeah, so longest race I've ever done was actually just on July 31st this year. It was supposed to be last year, just with the cancellations, it got moved to this year. Luckily, we were able to get the race in with the restrictions lifted this year, so I was able to do it's the Canadian Death Race. It's up in Grand Cache.
Oh, it sounds pleasant. The Canadian Death Race, yeah.
Yeah, it's a very pleasant walk in the park. Yeah, so it's up in Grand Cache, Alberta. So still in the mountain kind of ranges up further northern Alberta.
Okay.
It's 125K, with about 5,000 meters of elevation. So about just over half of Everest is what we're looking at for distance. And so the cutoff is 24 hours. So that was the longest race I've ever done, and that's the longest I've ever ran. It's double the distance that I've ever ran up until that point.
Yes, and I just had to bing it up here, but it's about 78 miles, right? Like just under 78 miles. That's pretty ridiculous. Because I know like an achievement for a lot of people is to do 100 miles in under 24 hours, like on a road. So to do about 78 miles with running half the elevation of Everest is unbelievable. Like you said that was the cutoff?
Yeah, because so the cutoff is 24 hours. There's because you can get points through what's called UTMB, which is the big race out in Europe that you can get points for.
Okay.
So to get the points that you want to qualify to be able to apply for those lottery races, you have to make the 24-hour cutoff. And that's they'll pull people off the course if they don't meet certain cutoffs at certain stages.
Wow.
But depending on where you're at, but yeah, I was just over 20 hours and 8 minutes.
Wow. So I mean, that's ridiculous. I don't even know how to like wrap my head around something like that. It's so crazy. So when you're doing a race like that, how do you train for something like that? Like, what's the mileage of a typical week look like? And obviously, you ramp up towards the event.
Yeah, my training is typically I was averaging at peak about 80 kilometers a week is what I was peaking at. Just the family and work and everything. My training is a little bit different. I have other priorities that have to be worked into the mix as well. Mm-hmm. So I might be on the lower end of the mileage when you look at some ultra runners. The one thing that I can say is it's kind of not the one size fits all. You only have to train your body to run that distance once in a period of time. So I like to go with less is better in certain instances, knowing that, I can only peak maybe a couple times a year. So really, to stack my races with too many, it's just overkill. I see so many people early on putting races too close together, and there's no way to physically get your body ready for that. So yeah, about 80K a week is what I'm looking at.
So it's kind of like a quality over quantity type of thing for you. It's the
Yeah,
miles that you're putting in are really, focused and purposeful. You're not just kind of, it's like, hey, I'll just go out and do something randomly today. I mean, everything is calculated in what you're doing.
yeah, it's definitely, you try to stay away from those garbage miles, and you're really kind of focused. And when you have those days when you can put in those good efforts. So for instance, like a typical week for me would be, Monday's my rest day. Makes it easier for me. Tuesday would be, let's say, a 1 hour easy run with a few strides in the middle of it just to get a little bit of speed work. Wednesday would be typically a little bit of strength with maybe a little bit of a shorter run. Thursday would be another kind of hour run, maybe another strength day just to kind of work on tired legs. And then Friday would be a little bit of a longer run. And then Saturdays and Sundays, depending on how the weekend shaped up, you would split it into 2 longer runs on either day. Or the way that I've actually kind of done it is I just can't justify the time being out on the trails for 6 hours on 2 days a week with, family and life. Mm-hmm. So I actually did just a longer session, but I actually did a higher quality effort. So it might be 10K, but I'm running at race pace. And then my Sunday is a long run out on the trails, or if I can't get to the trails, it would be a road run. But I would say most of my runs, I would say 80% trail, 20% road, and 70% of my runs are easy runs. That's just trying to build that aerobic base up.
And easy is a relative term, right?
Yeah, easy for me.
Right.
Easy for me. Yeah.
Now, if you ever, just kind of off topic here, but have you ever run into any like crazy situations when you're out in the trails by yourself? You ever come across any like bears or wolves or anything like that? Because that's what scares me. Like that would freak me the hell out about wildlife out there.
Yeah, I mean, up in my area where we run in some of the trails in the backcountry, we're definitely carrying bear spray with us. I've come across a bear just hiking. I haven't come across any other wildlife that's kind of scared me, but I've been in one predicament with some weather last year with all the races that were canceled. There's a race that will run out here. It's called the Canmore Quad. So there's 4 peaks around the town of Canmore. So it's Hauling, East End of Rundle, Lady McDonald, and Grotto. So they're all four different peaks. And the intent is you have to start somewhere in the town of Canmore, and you have to end at the same place in the town of Canmore. And you have to run to each peak back and forth through town. 2 peaks are on one side, 2 peaks are on the other. You have to run back and forth, up and down during the day to finish them. So I was Lady McDonald. I got to the what we call the false summit, and then there's a knife edge ridge that you have to go across to get to the actual true summit. And you're kind of holding, and you're doing a little bit of a scramble on some exposed rock. It's probably the sketchiest terrain that I've ever been on.
God, this sounds terrifying.
For hiking, for running, I should say. And I got to the other side, saw some clouds moving in. It was, we were talking, this is beginning of July. We weren't expecting any weather that day. Mm-hmm. I got a storm alert on my watch because I has a barometer on it, and I saw these clouds moving in. I'm like, oh, I'm okay. I took a picture, just me and the summit, turned around, and it just, like, the wind had just pushed it in, and it was just snow pellets coming at me, like 70 kilometers an hour, just pummeling me. And I'm up there by myself, and I have to go back across this ridge in like a whiteout conditions, all by myself. So I made the decision to not sit there because I didn't know how long it was going to last. And I scrambled across and made it to the actual other side of the summit. And yeah, it was a pretty sketchy scramble down with some scree. And yeah, it was definitely a pretty scary situation to have yourself in.
Yeah, so did you wind up finishing all 4 of the peaks on that day?
No, so I did Grotto first, ran down, went up Lady Mac, and I came off of that. And I think I was a little bit rattled with what I had just gone through. I fell a couple times coming down the scree as well when in the conditions.
Jeez. And
I ended up getting to the halfway mark, and I ended up pulling the pin. It was one of those days where there's no sense in trying to go back out there when you're just mentally not ready for it.
Right.
And then I actually went back 3 weeks later with a buddy and finished it. So, yeah, it was definitely an interesting day, to say the least.
Well, congratulations on finishing it. That's a hell of an achievement, man. That's really impressive.
Yeah, thanks.
Yeah, no problem. So, what's the next big one for you? Or what's your schedule like the rest of the? I ask you a million questions because I'm so interested in this.
I love questions. Love it.
What's the season? Is there a specific season for this? Do you run in the winter? Are there races then, or?
Yeah, so I'll run in the wintertime for training. I don't typically do any races in the winter. I usually use that to kind of build my base for spring, summer, fall.
Okay.
So there was supposed to be a race that was happening third week of September here. It was a 3-day stage race out in Golden, BC, which is a few hours away from me. But with just some new restrictions that came in, they had to reduce the number of people that could be at events again. So they had to cancel that race, and there was supposed to be a ton of people there just because races weren't really happening, and now this one got canceled. So unfortunate for the organizers of the race. It was the Trans Rockies group that organized it. So unfortunate that we have to reschedule that for next year. But I decided to sign up for one of my old school 5 Peak sport races actually next weekend, just to see if I still have my legs under me for the shorter distances.
Nice. And what's the distance on that one?
That one's only 6.8 kilometers, so just a little baby one compared to what I did at the beginning of August there.
That means you're just really gonna push it then, huh?
Yeah, I'm just gonna let it go and see what happens.
Nice. Well, good luck.
Yeah.
And I'll for those listening too. I like to do this on every guest that I have on here. But when I produce it and put it on YouTube, it'll have all your social media handles too. So obviously you have Instagram, but any other ones that you have, just DM me and then I'll put them in the description. So
sounds good.
If someone's interested in following your race career and stuff like that, go ahead.
Sounds good. Appreciate that. Yeah, and the other race that I have coming up is it's in Canmore. It's the traditional Grizzly Ultra race. It's a 50-kilometer race, and I'm splitting it with a buddy of mine. So I'll do half of that distance, and he'll do the other half. It's 5 legs that are split up. So that'll probably be the end of the season for the ultra running in that regard, and then just trying to plan for next year is what the goal is. So
I know you said you can only peak, and not you, but anybody. You only have the ability to really peak, a couple times a year. How many races have you done so far this year?
Yeah, so I've only actually done 2 races so far this year. That's all I had. And Golden was supposed to be the death race in Golden. Were supposed to be kind of my 2 races that I was trying to be prepared for. With Golden not happening, it's kind of probably going to move to that Grizzly Ultra race. It's to be the best, fast as I can on those 2 legs that I have to run.
Nice.
So that's and it was only about a 3-week difference. So I'll still be prepared mentally and physically for it. So I'm just moving over that way.
Gotcha. Okay, that makes sense then. Yeah, this sucks with everything going on and the restrictions. You think by now we'd be out of it, right? But here we are.
Yeah.
It's frustrating. So what? So I guess the question I have for you with I'll use the example for what I do. I do sprint triathlon, and the farthest you can go with that really would be. Obviously there's professional circuits and stuff like that. I'm not there, but amateur level type stuff. The most I can do is like Team USA, age group stuff. So that's my goal. Everything that I do is kind of geared for that. So my next big race is in Arizona in September, and that's to qualify for the World Championships, and that's kind of like the epitome, like the big, what I'm shooting for. In the world of ultra running, is there like a peak, or if you're do Ironman distance, like the World Championships in Kona, like that's what you're shooting for. Is there one of those in the world of ultra running?
Yeah, there's kind of a little bit of a different. I would say there's kind of like 3 different routes that I would say that I'm looking at myself. There's probably some more that I'm probably not even thinking of. So there's that one that I spoke about earlier, UTMB. It's kind of like the Super Bowl of ultra running in Europe. So you get points, some races, all the races that want to apply to be like a UTMB points race. And you get a certain number of points. If you get, I think it's like 10 points, and you can apply to enter one of the races at UTMB. It's a lottery.
Okay.
So you can apply to get into those with those UTMB points. Within Canada, there's also, you can qualify for the Canadian Mountain Running Championship as well, which is like a Team Canada type of event. And then depending on how you do, you can actually go to other countries as well to participate in the national, like the worldwide mountain running championships. And then the other kind of larger events you'd be looking at are something like Western States endurance run down in the US there.
Yep.
As well as like Hard Rock 100. Those are kind of the pinnacle of those ones. And then you also have and what I'm planning on doing next year, maybe we can chat about this one after, is backyard style races. I don't know if you've heard of those.
No, let's talk about it right now. I'm interested. You got me. I'm
Sure.
hooked.
Yeah, so backyard style races started down in Tennessee with Lazarus Lake. I don't know if you've heard of like Barclays marathons,
Yep.
or anything like that. So he started backyard running, which is essentially loop races. So what you do is every hour on the hour, you have to be prepared and ready to run the next loop. And each loop, and I should know this number off the top of my head, but it's somewhere around like 6.6 kilometers. Give or take, or 4.73 miles, somewhere in that range. I'm probably off by a little bit there. But you have to be ready to run that every hour on the hour. So let's say if it takes you 40 minutes to finish that lap, you have 20 minutes to sleep, rest, eat, recover. But you have to be ready at that start line to go on that next hour, or you're out. And it goes until there's one person left.
That's so crazy. Yeah, for those who are listening who don't know what the Barkley Marathons are, I mean, I'll try to describe it. I watched the Netflix documentary, but basically it's this guy started this ridiculous concept where it was is it a full marathon, the loop?
I can't remember if the loop was a full marathon for each one, but I know it's a significant distance through very unforgiving terrain.
You're running up hills where there's thorns and all kinds of crazy stuff, and you have to prove that you got there by he gives you the page of a book, and you rip that page out. So if say there's like 10 page, and you have to navigate yourself too. That's like a huge catch too. Is it's not a trail. It's he gives you a map and the directions, and you got to like navigate yourself too. And then the first lap you do like clockwise, the second lap you do counterclockwise, and then it's like as people come in, so you can't even chase anyone because that person's going to go clockwise and the next person's counterclockwise. And I think is it 5 loops, maybe?
Yeah, I think it's 5. Yeah, and I think I can't remember how many people have finished it. It's been a very small amount of people that have actually finished it.
Yeah, the first X amount of years, I forgot the number of years, but like no one had finished it for a long time. And then, and just to be a jerk, sometimes he'll put, or not sometimes, I think they said in the show that he put someone who he knows couldn't finish it. Just for the hell of it, just to like have to. And the worst part about it is if you can't finish it, there's no one to help you. You just have to find your way back to the start. So
yeah, it's like this. It's like the sacrificial lamb somebody applied that would have no chance at finishing it.
Yep.
Yeah.
Just wacky stuff. So that's basically what he's talking about. So all right, go on. Sorry.
Yeah. So the backyard style races. So what it is so you run 12 hours of a trail loop that takes you every that exact distance. And then they switch to 12 hours of a road loop at nighttime. And then they switch back to the 12 hours of the trail the next day. So you can pretty much go, I think they're sitting at 72 hours was the last winner, somewhere in that range. For the actual, so there's a big competition. It's called Big's Backyard Ultra. It's kind of like the Super Bowl of the backyard running. And again, there's different states and different provinces in Alberta and even across the world. They're all starting their own backyard races that are going to be qualifying races based on silver and bronze tickets you can get an entry into Bigs if you win those races. So there's one that's happening next year in April that just got announced just a little ways away from me in BC that I'm going to attempt in April. So I'm going to try to do a backyard style race instead.
That's so cool. So what's the specifics on that one that you're going to do?
Yeah, so that one's out. That one's out in the Shuswap in BC, just outside of in British Columbia, about 6 hours from where I am. So yeah, it'll be 12 hours of trail loop, 12 hours of a road loop, and pretty much last man standing. So I'm not sure how far I'm going to be able to go, but I feel mentally, though, like the mental game comes into it huge, absolutely huge. Yeah.
I can imagine, man. I had a guy on here. His name's Cole Crosby. He set the record for running the entire length of the state of New Jersey.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, just like what? It's like 232 miles or something like that, and just no breaks. Just went out, did it straight, and and it was like, it wasn't like nice weather either, and he was getting pelted with like cold rain and stuff. And I guess I wanted to tie in because I do kind of like an offshoot of the show where I interview people like you, but then I'll talk about a topic and I'll talk about motivations and goal setting and stuff like that. And I've only done 2 of them so far, but someone like you, I think, would be the perfect person to kind of dig into motivations, because I think to the average person, so not even, I mean, someone like me who, like, I train my ass off, but I'm not doing nearly like what you're doing. It's a different world. Like, it's crazy to me. What motivates you to do this? You know, what motivates you to do it, I guess. We'll start there.
Yeah, I think the thing for me is I love the process of getting to that point, but I don't obsess about the outcome afterwards. I think so many people focus on that outcome, and then once you have it and you complete it, once it's done, you sit there and you're almost like empty, like what's next?
Yeah.
Whereas for me, I focus on that process piece of like getting my body prepared to do it. And the race for me is kind of that like reward in the end. It's not it's not the end all be all, because the process is what got me there. The 6 months of effort and work that I put in ahead of that is what matters. It doesn't, that one day is gone. It's no different than like a wedding or something like that. But once the day is done, the wedding's done, and now you're married and now you're together, or those situations. And it's like with the race, I think there's a lot of people that just get tied to that outcome too closely. So for me, it's the motivation is the process.
Wow, that's a really interesting answer. And thanks for throwing the wedding in there too. A month from today, I'm getting married. So shout out to Jenny.
Yeah. Congrats.
Wow, that's a really interesting answer. I love that. That's pretty cool. So outside of running, do you have a full-time job? Obviously, you got a family. Like, what's your life like outside of this world?
Yeah, so I've worked in emergency services for nearly 2 decades now.
Whoa.
I started almost out of high school. I started working for a helicopter air ambulance company here in Alberta, dispatching helicopter ambulances to critical care patients. So I worked in the dispatch center, hearing the worst of calls that can come in for people who have injuries and situations for over 12 years. Did numerous kind of roles within that organization.
Wow.
And then I moved over to our local 911 agency now. I worked in fire and EMS dispatch, call taking, as well as stakeholder liaison relationships now with our fire departments and emergency services personnel with police, as well as the airport and other agencies.
So to be clear, you've probably heard people who were hiking or running in the woods call with some pretty gruesome, grisly things going on, and you're like, you know what? I'll take my chances. I'll roll the dice.
100%. I don't think there's anything that somebody could tell me from their experience or an injury or a situation that I probably have not heard of in some way, shape, or form over the last 20 years almost.
That's crazy. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Not awesome for those people. Just awesome that you're so razor focused on what you do. I love it, man. That's so cool. How do just a side note, how do you get into something like that? Like you said, straight out of high school, you got into that, or?
Well, I fell into it. So I was interested in becoming a paramedic, was what my kind of goal was, coming out of high school. And I ended up doing my emergency responder course, which is the basic 2-week course that gives you a higher level than standard first aid. And my 2 instructors of the course were actually paramedics that worked for STARS. And they said, hey, you should come volunteer. It always, it looks good on the resume for, volunteering with an agency that you're already tied in with. Mm-hmm. So I ended up volunteering, and I saw, I was volunteering in the call center, doing a couple jobs in there. And I saw what the people were doing that were taking the calls. And I just sat there. I was like, I want to do this.
Wow.
And I completely turned 180, and I was like, I guess this is what I'm going to do. And a position came up for those kind of lower level. I applied, and then I actually became one of at that time, I was the youngest person to ever dispatch the aircraft at that time. So I think I was 19 when I started in that role.
Wow.
So it was when you think about coming out of high school, and I think about what some people do between those like 19 and 24 age ranges, and I'm looking at what I'm doing, and I'm like, what am I doing here? Like, I'm like 10 years the younger to everybody in here. So it was, I was the baby.
It's awesome, man. And it's so interesting because with all the people that I talk to, most of the people that I talk to aren't professionals. They are, amateurs and just doing it at a really high level. And the common thread among everyone that I've talked to is just, the success that they find in their athletic endeavors is always, parallel to successes they see at work or in other areas or avenues of life, whether it be, volunteering at nonprofits or, success in a sales role or what you're doing, being the youngest, ever to do it. Like, I just find that interesting, and I don't think it's a coincidence. I think that the drive to compete and, push yourself with the consistency of training and all that kind of stuff, I think is a direct correlation to how you live your life outside of that too. But have you always been this way? Like, have you always enjoyed sports, like as a kid, or?
Yeah, so I played soccer ever since I was 5 up until probably 5 years ago when I decided that I didn't want to do team sports anymore for a while, and that's when I picked up those off-road triathlons.
Okay.
And I wanted to do something for me at that point rather than team sports, but I played fairly high level soccer, as high as you can within Calgary major soccer league for a year, and I played as high as I could get here.
Wow.
Just at that time. But switching from a team sport to an individual sport, I could always run. I always had ran. I trail ran still while I was playing soccer. But it's definitely an interesting dynamic switching from team sports to somewhere where you're responsible for yourself and only yourself.
Right. Yeah. I totally agree. I mean, it's interesting too because I think soccer players are uniquely qualified to get into endurance running as opposed to football or baseball or hockey or anything other sport like that, because with soccer, I mean, you're just out there, and it truly is an endurance sport for the 2 45-minute halves. You're out there nonstop running, and I think I've seen a lot. I had a kid when I was back in Buffalo. He had never run a 5K before, and he was a soccer player and still played in leagues. He played pretty high level in college and stuff, and then his first 5K, he won it, like first overall. And I'm like, you son of a bitch, because I've been training, and I wasn't even close to him. He'd be like 3 minutes. But that's really interesting. By the way, huge matchup on Sunday, USA Canada for the World Cup qualifier.
I know that's coming up for sure.
Yeah. So hopefully, hopefully you guys suck and you lose. So I actually moved to. I live in Frisco, Texas. I moved here because I got a job with FC Dallas in Major League Soccer. Nice. Yeah. So that's why I originally moved here, but the pandemic took care of that. So not anymore. But still going to all the games and everything and follow them. So it's I really was never into soccer until I worked for him, and now that I worked for him and I got close to a lot of these that world, that's pretty cool to see. I don't know if you've been following it all. Ricardo Pepi, he's the leading goal scorer for the United States players in Major League Soccer. He's the top American goal scorer right now. He's 18 years old, and he came up through our academy here, and he's on the men's national team now, and he's going to be starting hopefully on. They play tomorrow, so it's crazy. But it's just a side note. It's
that's cool.
Yeah. So soccer's I never really appreciated it until I was in that world. I was your typical American, like soccer's for idiots.
I was the quintessential Swiss Army knife. That's why maybe endurance running for me is kind of second nature. Is when somebody else wanted to substitute because they were tired, I would always just take their position and just move around the field because I was the one that wanted to stay on them because I was fit enough to stay on. So
nice.
It was just one of those unique situations, I guess.
That was going to be the question I was going to ask you, what player, or what position, but I guess you answered that one.
Everything except for goalie.
Now, do you miss soccer? Do you miss playing? Do you ever think about playing any rec leagues or anything like that? Or
I played a few co-ed rec leagues just with some friends, and the problem is I'm a very competitive person in nature, so playing co-ed rec leagues is very hard for me just from my competitive nature to always want to be like doing better. I think that's just innately in me, so I think I'll get back to some men's league stuff at some point, but I'm pretty focused on my running right now for the foreseeable future.
Listen, you're preaching to the choir. I played professional arena football in my 20s, and I tried to play flag football, and it's the same thing. It's like I want to be all in. I can't kind of half-ass it, and I felt the same thing. So I definitely know what you're going through with that, man, for sure.
I actually ended up with more injuries playing rec league soccer than I ever did playing high-level competitive soccer.
That's interesting you say that. I've had you're definitely not the first person to say, first person to tell me something like that. I had one of my friends. He got drafted by the Diamondbacks, and obviously a very, very good baseball player, and his first rec softball league ever, he fractured his orbital going for a fly ball because he just went all out trying to catch it, and someone wasn't listening because he was calling him off, and just smashed. So that's just
Crazy.
one example. But yeah, I feel you, man. But I think that's what's cool about individual sports is, you can take it as hard as you want, and you don't have to depend on anybody else. And I don't know if I would assume it's the same way, but like what I really like about it too is in soccer, you have a lot, and for any really like team sport, you have a lot of just kind of naturally there's always those one or two like naturally gifted athletes that are just monsters, and they work hard. They may work hard, but like how do I put this? In endurance sports, I think what really draws me to endurance sports is come race day, you can't hide behind your athletic ability. It's like, how much effort did you put in for this race? And that's going to come to fruition in the race. You know what I mean? Yeah. It's not like in soccer or definitely in arena football, you have like, so I had a receiver on my team that just slacked off all practice. He definitely wasn't working out, but he was, really tall and he was an athletic freak. And so his lack of effort at practice and on the off, and his off days, just it didn't show on game day because he could, just rely on his athletic ability. Whereas like an endurance race, I don't think that's true. But do you feel the same way about that, or I don't know? That's just what
and I think, and this is where it comes with endurance racing. People think you just have to train the body. Like as soon as you start creeping up, I mean, I can attest in this last race, that the long race that I did, that death race. As soon as you get to a certain point, you start questioning whether or not you can go further. Like as soon as I hit that mark, where it's the furthest that I had ever ran before, I hit a lull for probably 5 kilometers where I'm like, what are you doing? Why are you out here? Like, whoa, like, what are you thinking right now? Like you're running 125K in a day. Like, are you crazy? And I think, with anything, I think if you want it bad enough, you're going to find a way to finish it, or you're going to find a way to do it. You're going to find a way. If you want it, you're going to go for it. And I think that's where some people just either they do it because they think that's what they want, and then they realize that's maybe in the moment that's not what I want. Like I don't want to be running this far. Like why did I do this? Yeah. And some people end that get to that spot, but for me, I think I hit that spot, and I think it's a matter of overcoming that. If you can have that resiliency to overcome that, the time that happens in the next race now, I've now learned like, oh, you can go 125K. Like what's another 50K to make it a 100-miler? Like what's the difference? Like you've gone this far. So
I'm going to sound like a broken record here, but I'm in the firm belief that, especially in this day and age, there aren't people. I think there's a specific requirement, or at least it's innate in us to push ourselves to some capacity, and just the overwhelming majority of people never experience that feeling what you're talking about. It's when you get to that point of like almost complete collapse, or like you start questioning like, why the hell am I out here? What am I doing? But then the other side of that, when you cross that finish line or you achieve that goal that you were shooting for, that reward, I mean,
it's huge.
Winning a video game, or like watching a movie, or getting a like on Facebook, like these things don't hold a candle to that feeling of accomplishment that you feel at the end of a run. And it doesn't have to be running 100 miles. In your case, it can be, but the person who never thought they were capable of running a mile or two, or doing a 5K, and then crossing the finish line of a 5K, like I can't tell you how much I encourage people to do things like that. Set a goal and just set out to accomplish that goal. And then it's just a slippery slope. It's like intoxicating to have that feeling of it's exactly what you just said. I just did this. Well, what if I could do this? This was not, I could do this. Now let's do the next thing. And it just gets you to the point where it's like, I went a different way with it. I'm not going to go endurance, like crazy endurance. I'm going to go as fast as I possibly can. Like if I can do, a triathlon in 58 minutes, why can't I do it in 57? Why? And then, but still, it's the same concept. It's, you're pushing yourself to the point of things that you didn't think were capable of. And I can't just express enough how important that is, I think. And so many people are missing out on that, I think, nowadays with everything that we have going on.
Pushing past that point of comfort is so hard for so many people.
Yeah.
Because we're conditioned to be safe.
Yeah,
like
we seek comfort. Like that's the point.
Like your body's natural reaction to fear is safety. Your body's natural reaction to pain is comfort. Like you avoid pain at all costs. That's your body's natural response to any of that. So you almost have to be fighting your own biochemistry to figure out, like, okay, if I can just push past this, like, I know I still have, they always say, like, when it comes to that mental aspect, as soon as your brain is telling you you're done, you have like 50% left in your body. Like your brain is just trying to protect you from going too far, but your body's like, if you've trained it appropriately and you got your mental side trained as well, you can overcome that. But it's getting yourself to that point that so many people, I think, avoid just because they don't want to step out of that comfort zone. They don't like being uncomfortable. Whereas me, I'm like, if you're not pushing past that into that uncomfortable position, you're never going to learn anything. You're going to stay where you are. You're going to stay stuck. Mm-hmm. You're never going to learn past that. And I think it creeps all the stuff that I'm learning with running creeps into my work, my career, family life, goals, everything, even outside of running. Like you can take all of this and apply it somewhere else too.
That's exactly what I was saying earlier. What you just said, I really think was well thought out, because I'm a dum-dum, so I can't articulate as well as sometimes people like you can. So I appreciate the way that you phrased that, because that, I think, is right. I think people living in their comfort zone, and don't get me wrong, I mean, there is, value in seeking comfort, right? Like I don't want to be homeless, you know what I mean? I don't want to be like searching for food every day, but at the same time, like I think it's important to, maybe not, this is the wrong way to figure, like artificially create, but like, go out and push your limits, push your boundaries. You're capable of so much more than what you think you are. It's, it really is. And that's the whole point of this whole, thing that I have going on here, is I want to talk to people like you. And I want people to understand that you weren't born 100-mile runner. Like that's just not what you've built to this. It's been incremental. It's been, you've been purposeful in every approach that you've taken. I mean, you didn't get into running until what? You said like 15 years ago, 20 years ago, something like that?
So even in high school, I did a little bit of track, but nothing competitive, nothing, it wasn't until my early 20s when I really kind of picked up the trail running and wanted to do something different.
Yeah, and that's I think a lesson that I love people sharing that. The guy I had on last week, he's a professional triathlete. He does the Olympic distance stuff, and his goal is to go to the Olympics. And it's funny because his goal is to go to the Olympics when he was a kid, when he was like 10 or 11 years old, but it was to go as a runner. And he was following that path. He ran at Oklahoma and, was doing really well, but then had a major injury. Well, when he got that major injury, to rehab, he started, cycling and swimming like nonstop. And he got so good at those two sports. He's only been doing the sport a year and a half, and now he's a professional, which is like,
crazy,
mind-boggling. Yeah, because you think, if you're a professional, you've been doing it your whole life, but it's something that I think just pushing yourself. And to go back to what you said earlier too about fear, people's relationship with fear is pretty interesting, because I forgot the exact quote. I'm a big quotes guy. I like a lot of the sappy, cheesy, inspirational quotes that are floating around out there. And one of them was something like, it was something about Michael Jordan, I think, and it was, he's like, courage isn't the absence of fear, it's your relationship with fear and how you handle it. You turn that fear, like that, before you line up for a race. I mean, it's a tense moment, especially for someone like my races are only like an hour, and that's an intense moment. But like for you, knowing that it's going to be 20 hours, 24 hours, like that's a pretty intense, surreal moment. And obviously, there's a little bit of adrenaline going through your veins, right? It's but you bottle that up, and how do you handle that before a race? Like it's obviously there's adrenaline, going, right?
Yeah, and I think again with every race, a little bit of learning comes. And I've had a few coaches. I don't have a coach right now, but I've had a few coaches over the last 3 years. And the one that really sticks with me from my coach that I had when I first started doing ultras, he said, if you can get to the halfway mark of any race and still feel like you're just starting, he's like, you've already won. If you can get your brain to that point of, you're not pushing yourself too hard too early, and I was guilty of that when I ran my shorter distances. I would go like a bat out of hell, get in front of everybody, and then you'd have people start passing you and you'd feel a little bit off. But he's like, if you can get to that halfway mark and still feel like you can, just unleash on that second half of the race, he's like, you've already won, because he's like, you made it halfway, you still have half left to go, and you still feel fresh, like go for it.
Wow,
but for me, like that, yeah, like that early motivation, like I actually don't really get very many nerves now at the beginning of races, because I know the race isn't going to be won in that first hour. The race isn't going to be won in that first half an hour. It's going to be won in that second half for me, because I know mentally that's where, if I can get to that spot, that's where my race starts for me.
That's interesting. I like that. I've never heard a phrase like that before, but that's pretty cool. I like that. I'm going to steal that from you.
It's all yours.
All right, cool. You heard it. You heard it on the podcast. The question I was going to ask you too is, I mean, for instance, here in Dallas, I see, the same people at all these races, and it's sprint triathlon, so it's not this like overbearing, crazy endeavor. For something like ultra running, I can only imagine the community can't be like that large. I mean, do you see a lot of the same people in the community that you go to the same races that you do?
Oh yeah, 100%. Like the trail community and the ultra community is like, when I say trail and ultra, it's pretty much combined. Like we didn't, ultra runners, like we're pretty inclusive when it comes to, if you're running 5K and that's your distance, like I will be sitting there clapping while you finish. Like I have, there's none of us are like, oh, you're not a runner if you don't go this far. Like we're all very inclusive, and everybody's racing a different race. And like our community is so tight in our area, everywhere from, BC to Alberta, you see the same people at all the races. You chat with each other. Somebody knows that you did this race last year, so they ask for advice from you. Like when I did the death race this year, I actually, I know two people that have finished the death race and actually won the death race over the last previous years. So I was able to get some intel from both of them. And one of them, he was doing the marathon distance that day, and I actually ran with him for probably a good hour and a half on one of the legs. So just the community is really tight, and everybody pushes everybody on. Like, even though, for me, the fastest runner finished the race in, just under 13 or just over 13 hours, 12 to 13 hours. Like, that's amazing. Like you say, there's certain people that are gifted and can destroy these races like that. You look at these people and you're like, holy, like, how can they do this? Yeah. And, and I'm finishing at 20 hours. And then the next day, we're all, we went to the rec center and, recovered together and those types of things. And you're just like, okay, like I'm sitting here with the people that won, but we're just shooting it. Like there's no animosity. There's no like back and forth. Like there's very little, what's the word? Like kind of like rubbing each other the wrong way in any way. Like everybody is just super inclusive. Like that's the best way I can explain it.
I found that with endurance sports in general. I think it's pretty cool to see it's such a strong community, and I think it's maybe some of it is, you want to see the sport grow. So it's good to have, new members of the community come in and kind of share your knowledge. And I think it's, maybe another part of it is, like you said, people especially in your world are trying to push the boundaries of, what is possible. And I think together trying to see how far you can take this community and like how big it can get. I mean, I don't know if this was a rumor or not, but I thought they may have been talking about adding like ultra distances to the Olympics in 2024.
Yeah, I heard that they're doing. I can't remember exactly. I think it was that France in 2024.
Yeah, Paris. Yeah,
Paris. Yeah, and I think there's somewhere where they test certain sports ahead of the Olympics, and I think that the ultra running was on the list of one of those potential test sports to see if it would work out or not for future Olympics.
That'd be pretty cool. So, yeah, I didn't know if that was a rumor or not. So yeah, you just confirmed. Pretty cool.
Yeah, I did hear that.
Wow, this is neat. I'd love to watch that. I was going to ask you too, just kind of like while you're on the course, I always equate everything to my sport just because that's my basis or my anchor, I guess. But you know, we all start at the same time, and it's an hour race. So, you know, it's sprint try. You know, it's a half-mile swim, 12.5-mile bike, a 5K. So you're talking seconds. You know, you're sprinting into the transition area. You're getting on your bike while it's moving. You know, you're putting your shoes on while you're riding. So you have an idea of like where everyone is, you know, and if you're towards the front of the pack, like you can see who's ahead of you. If you're running a 100-mile race, they just keep using 100 for, you know, the sake of argument. How are you near anybody, or are you just completely by yourself and you have no idea what place you're in or where anyone is, and you just kind of go?
You know, it really depends. Like for me at the death race, for the first kind of 2 to 3 legs, there was always somebody near me over that first kind of 60K. And then as soon as it kind of got to the last, you know, it was about a 40K leg up the highest peak. And then it was just kind of coming to sundown when you're coming down. For my case, I was coming down the backside on when the sun was setting. And I pretty much was going up. Like, you can see people, but there might not be people right next to you. You can still see them. But in the dark, like, you're by yourself unless you see a headlamp.
Wow.
Unless you happen to be running with somebody. But it doesn't happen very often on those longer distances unless you're with a friend that decided to run with you or something. Like, you might stick with somebody if you're having a little bit of a tough time to push each other a little bit. I had a few people like that in certain instances during the race where we kind of stuck with each other for a little while, and then we just went on our own separate ways. Either I went ahead or they went ahead, or vice versa. But you tend to find those little pockets of people every now and then. You sit with them, talk for a while, and some people are friendlier than others, and some people just want to chat with you. And you tend to sometimes follow down their pace sometimes, so you have to be a little bit careful. If you're moving slower than you want to be, but sometimes it's the social aspect too. So,
and I was going to ask you too. I mean, so obviously no music.
So I am a rare breed. I rarely, if ever, listen to music, even when I'm running, period. And on ultra runs, most of the races are stipulation that you can't have any earbuds in or anything. Some people will still, but I tend to just not. I like to just be in my own head.
That's crazy. Are there mile markers and stuff out there, or you know by your watch?
Yeah, I know by my watch. They have like the larger distance mile markers. Like this race had like a 50K marker and a 100K marker, but that was pretty much it.
Wow. And then the other thing I was going to ask you too, just kind of like going off, you said you're competitive. Obviously, you're doing giant races. Is it hard? Do you guys all start at the same time?
Yeah, so it's a mass start. Depending on when some of the races had restrictions where you couldn't do mass starts, there was wave starts, but majority of us, we all start at the same time for that distance.
So is it hard for you? Because I can only imagine, as time goes on, there's less and less people around you. As someone who is competitive like yourself, when you see someone like pass you, or you see someone ahead of you gain ground, how hard is it for you to control yourself, to be like, stop, don't pay attention to that person, run your race, be smart,
Yeah, I think I've learned over the years that it doesn't matter. Like, if you sometimes you have to get your mindset around the fact that, like, you're not racing anybody else, you're racing yourself. And knowing that, if you race yourself and you've trained for it and you're prepared, you're going to be passing people no matter what. Like, if that's your goal and you're doing well, and if somebody passes you, it doesn't mean they're, I don't let it get to me too much. I mean, I can honestly say the last, on the last leg, when it was in the dark with the headlamps at nighttime, and you see headlamps off in the distance behind you, and I knew that there was 3 people behind me that were running the solo distance as well, because there was a relay race at the same time. So there's 5 runners and each person did a leg, but I knew they were soloists behind me because I had passed them previously, and I knew they were in a group. And I was like, I will not let them pass me, because I was like, 10 to 15K left, and I kind of got a little bit of a second win because I saved a little bit for the second part of the race, and I was not going to let them pass me.
I love that. I was going to ask you too. That's a good point that you just brought up too. Well, you didn't bring it up. It was just in my head. But so you can't see, but on the visual right here, I have that picture up of you running.
Yeah.
And you got a vest on or something like that.
Yeah.
What's in that vest? Obviously bear spray, you said, right? That's something you carry with you during these races?
Yeah, bear spray. Bear spray. I had sunscreen with me, a little CBD pain stick in case something cropped up for me. I am weird when it comes. We haven't talked about nutrition yet.
That's
so
where I was
I'm a
going
little
with
bit.
this. Yep, you read my mind.
So I'm a little bit. I wouldn't say I'm an odd duck, but I don't eat a lot when I'm running. I use liquid calories. So luckily enough, I became an ambassador for the company that I use quite a bit called Tailwind Nutrition. I don't know,
Oh yeah,
I'm sure
I've
you're
heard of
familiar
that.
with it. Yeah, so I've been using that ever since I started in ultra running. So I stick to liquid calories, or the odd Oreo tends to slip in if I'm hungry.
Nice.
But typically, so that entire 20-hour run, I went through. Was it? I think I calculated it something like 26 liters of Tailwind was what I went through.
Because that's pretty carb heavy, right? Is that, if I remember
So
correctly?
it's 200 calories for every 500 milliliter bottle of water mixed in with it. So the reason why I liked it is super simple. I have one bottle every hour, and if I'm at an aid station, I had the 1.5 liter bladder in my back as well too, because with how remote some of these aid stations were, there was only one aid station on one leg, and one leg didn't even have one.
Wow.
So you had to have what you needed with you. Unless you had a filter, you could filter some of the creek water. But I decided to just load up with Tailwind on my back, had it in my flasks, and then when I got to the aid station, I just had just a Ziploc bag of Tailwind again, filled up the bottles, and put more Tailwind in. I just like the simplicity of I get my hydration and I get my calories all at once. And then I'll have salt stick pills as well, or in my pack, because I dump salt like crazy. I'm one of those guys that I think you can even probably see in that picture. It's a little bit of sunscreen, but there's also probably just pure white sweat stuck on my face on that one picture. So I dump salt like crazy. So those salt stick tabs really come in handy. Had a jacket in the bag, and then poles as well. For some of those steeper climbs.
So not bananas, apples, protein bars, nothing like that.
Those are typically at the aid station. I had one gel with me. That's it, just as a backup, like an emergency backup, and applesauce. I stole my kids' applesauce.
Applesauce. That's interesting.
Yeah.
When you're running, obviously you got to watch, like you said. Is it a Garmin, I'd assume, or is it?
Actually, it's a Sunto is what I use right now.
What is it?
Sunto, SUUNTO.
Oh, I've heard of that before. Okay, yeah.
Same premise though. GPS watch.
Just out of curiosity, like I got out of the pool today and it said 600 calories. Right? Does it tell you how many calories you burn on a 20-hour run? Like
I'm going to look at my phone right now. I'm going to tell you how many calories I burned during that run, because when I looked at it the other day and I told somebody, their jaw dropped. I can't even remember what it was, but it was.
I can imagine.
It was something absolutely crazy. I'm just going to look at it here.
Well, while you're looking for that, what's your diet like outside of a race? Like, what's your day-to-day diet like? Is it carb heavy, or do you follow any specific diet, or is it just kind of eat what you want when you're hungry? What are you doing there?
I pretty much can get away with eating whatever I want as an ultra runner, as long as I'm training.
Yeah.
I do tend to, before races, I do tend to stay away from alcohol a week before, as well as I usually stay away from like the heavier meats and things like that a week before.
Really, you don't pregame your races with a lot of shots and stuff like that?
No, not me. I've done that for a few training runs, and it's never turned out really well. So I've taken that out of the regimen.
A little Tailwind with some vodka? No, not good?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I haven't mixed those yet. My little Jello shots yet. Yeah, so I burned just shy of 12,000 calories in that 20-hour run.
That's insane. Yeah. Oh, my God. That's so wild. Wow.
Yeah.
So let's just say the average, human eats about, every time you look on the back of a nutrition label, it says based on a 2,000 calorie diet. So that's basically 6 days worth of eating for an average person. That is
insane. And the amount of food that I had the next morning, like, because I finished the race at about 4 a.m. I slept for about 3 hours. I got up and I was just like, I am so hungry right now. Because again, I had only liquid calories in my body for an entire day. Like, I didn't eat any food other than a couple Oreos. And then I guess at the end of the race, I had a little bit of soup, but I didn't eat a whole lot. And then I went out for breakfast. I ordered 3 breakfasts that morning. Like, it was insane. I think I spent like $50 on breakfast just for me.
And I bet you still left hungry. Yeah.
Oh yeah. And then it was like second lunch, third dinner. Like, yeah, it was nuts trying to put all that back in.
For a sport like that, I mean, I can imagine you're probably just always playing catch up. with all the calories that you're burning. That's crazy.
Yeah, it's usually I'm running on a little bit of a deficit because it's hard to get that much in over a period of time. It's really hard to maintain it. So
Yeah, I bet, man. I bet. Well, listen, we are just coming up on an hour here, so I think this would probably be a good time to call it. But I always like to ask, is there anything that, because I know we mentioned on the side before, you're like, should I become prepared with anything? And I'm like, nah, man, we're just going to talk. So was there anything that you did think we were going to talk about, or that we didn't, or any last words that you'd like to kind of float out to the audience? The floor is all yours, man.
yeah, no, I think we pretty much did a good coverage of everything ultra. But yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head with that comfort zone piece. I think too many people get stuck, and for me, that finding that motivation to do something like that and set that goal, and set those little goals, like those base camp goals at the bottom that can get you there. So if 5K is your goal this week, like, okay, like if 5K is your goal and you get to that in 6 weeks, a month, whatever that is, like, celebrate the little things. Like you can't overlook those, because if you get to that, for me, that 125K race, and all I did was celebrate that 125K race, but I forgot about all that 6 months before, and those long runs that I actually put all the efforts in. If I'm not celebrating those small wins, like, you got to remember, you got to take advantage of those little things. Like, celebrate them. Don't overlook those little wins along the way.
I love it. Well said, man. And I really appreciate you coming on the show. And my goal for this too is to, have repeat people on as well. I want to check in with you after you do another big race. Let's have you on again, and we'll kind of do a recap, right? And kind of practice what you preach. You are celebrating, your successes and your progress, on to bigger and better things too. So let's get you on, later on when. When's your next race? You said in a couple.
Yeah, so I got September 11th, just that quick little 6K sport race, and then October 11th is the Grizzly Ultra that I'm splitting, and then the next big one that I'm planning for right now is April next year for that backyard style race.
Very good.
It's kind of the next big one.
Is it the Bigs Backyard Ultra?
That one is actually, so that one's the Shoe Shop Ultra is what it's called.
Gotcha.
So that's it'll be a bronze ticket race to have an entry, to have an opportunity to go to Bigs. Bigs usually has less than 100 people, but that's the show every 2 years now. So
you're gonna do it, man. You're gonna freaking do it. I can't wait to watch. The last thing I want to ask you too, for Tailwind, I know you said you're like affiliated with them. I'm assuming you have like a code or something like that.
Yeah, I have a link that I can send. Just with with everything going on, I don't have any direct discount codes this year with Tailwind. If you check out my Instagram, I have a couple of other companies I work with as well too, Lucky Canada, as well as Prevail Botanicals, and Beat It Canada as well, Beat It Sport Shots. So feel free to check out my Instagram if anybody has any questions about any of that. I'm more than happy to answer anything, or if you read any of my posts or anything about my race recaps and have questions about them, feel free.
Awesome. Yeah, shoot me your links, and I'll put them all in the description for you too, man. All right?
Sounds good.
All right. Well, thanks again, Evan. I really appreciate your time, and looking forward to following your progress.
Awesome. Thanks, Brian.